The dust cloud rising from the departing stagecoach seemed to mock her as Willa Kershaw stood alone on the wooden platform of the Deadwood depot, her gloved hands gripping the worn handle of a battered leather trunk, while the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on this South Dakota town in the summer of 1876. Inside her bodice pocket, the letter crinkled against her racing heart, its words already burned into her memory like a brand on cattle hide. I cannot marry you after all. Please forgive me and return home. The money enclosed should cover your journey back to Philadelphia. 23 years of believing in true love had led her here to this God-forsaken place, only to discover that the man who had promised her everything through countless perfumed letters had changed his mind the moment she arrived, sending a courier to deliver his cowardice in ink rather than facing her himself. The platform emptied quickly as families reunited and travelers hurried toward the town's main street, their boots thundering against the weathered planks until only silence remained. Willa watched them go, fighting the burning behind her eyes that threatened to spill over into tears she refused to shed in public. The money her former betrothed had sent would not even cover half the fare back east, and she had used every penny of her savings to make this journey in the first place. She had told her family goodbye with such confidence, such certainty that she was heading toward her destiny, and now the thought of returning in disgrace made her stomach twist with something worse than fear. "Madam, the depot closes in 10 minutes. The station manager called from the doorway, his voice impatient and unsympathetic. "You cannot stay here." Willa turned to face him, straightening her spine despite the trembling in her legs. "I understand. I am simply gathering my bearings." The man grunted and disappeared back inside, leaving her alone with her trunk and her shattered dreams. The main street of Deadwood stretched before her, a chaos of saloons, shops, and hastily constructed buildings that spoke of the recent gold rush that had transformed this place from empty wilderness into a bustling town practically overnight. Somewhere in one of those buildings was the man who had abandoned her without even the decency of a face-to-face conversation, and she found herself grateful she did not have to see him, did not have to hear whatever pathetic excuses he might offer. The sound of horse hooves on packed dirt made her look up, and she saw a lone rider approaching from the direction of town. Most people had stopped paying her any attention, too absorbed in their own affairs to care about a stranded woman at the depot, but this rider slowed his mount as he drew closer. Willa could make out few details at first, just the silhouette of a broad-shouldered man in a weathered hat sitting tall in the saddle. But as he came nearer, she found herself staring at the most striking face she had ever seen. He could not have been much older than her, perhaps 26 or 27, with features that seemed carved from the same rough stone as the Black Hills themselves. Sun-darkened skin stretched over high cheekbones and a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble, and when he removed his hat as he brought his horse to a stop, she saw hair the color of strong coffee falling almost to his shoulders. But it was his eyes that held her attention, pale gray like storm clouds, studying her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way she had never experienced before. "Seems like you might be in a difficult situation," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow carried clearly despite the noise from the street beyond. "That trunk looks too heavy for you to carry on your own, and the sun will be setting before too long." Willa lifted her chin, pride warring with practicality. "I appreciate your concern, but I can manage." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile but something close to it. "I did not mean to offend. My name is Samuel Vance. I run a cattle operation about 5 miles outside town, and I was raised to believe that leaving a lady stranded is about the worst thing a man can do." He paused, his eyes flicking to the empty platform and then back to her face. "Unless you are waiting for someone. No." The word came out harder than she intended, sharp with all the bitterness and disappointment churning inside her. "I am not waiting for anyone." Samuel dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with barely a sound despite his size. Up close, she could see he stood well over 6 feet tall, his frame lean and muscular in the way of men who worked hard for their living. His clothes were simple but well maintained, a blue cotton shirt rolled to his elbows and dark trousers held up by worn leather suspenders. Everything about him spoke of capability and quiet strength, so different from the flowery words and empty promises she had traveled across the country to claim. "The Kershaw Hotel has rooms," he offered, gesturing toward the main street. "Or Mrs. Patterson runs a boarding house that caters to respectable ladies. I would be happy to carry your trunk to either place, no strings attached. You have my word on that." Something in his straightforward manner, the lack of false charm or practiced smoothness, made Willa believe him. She had learned today what pretty words could hide, but this man did not deal in pretty words at all. "I do not have much money for a hotel." Samuel's expression did not change, but she saw understanding flicker in those gray eyes. "Mrs. Patterson is always looking for help with the cooking and cleaning. Might be she would work out an arrangement if you are interested in staying in Deadwood for a while." "I have nowhere else to go," Willa admitted, and the words felt like pulling splinters from a wound. "The person I came here to meet has decided I am not welcome after all." A muscle tightened in Samuel's jaw, and for the first time, she saw real anger cross his features. "Then that person is 10 kinds of fool, if you will pardon me saying so." He picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing at all, settling it easily against his shoulder. "Come on. Let me at least get you somewhere safe before dark. Deadwood can be rough on women alone, especially after the saloons get going." Willa gathered her skirts and followed him down the platform steps, her mind racing with questions she did not know how to ask. Why was this stranger helping her? What did he expect in return? But when she studied his profile as they walked, she saw nothing calculating in his expression, just that same steady competence that seemed as much a part of him as breathing. The boarding house turned out to be a 2-story building painted cheerful yellow, with window boxes full of struggling flowers fighting against the harsh climate. A sign reading "Patterson's Residence for Ladies" hung above the door, and when Samuel knocked, a plump woman in her 50s answered almost immediately, her face breaking into a warm smile when she saw him. "Samuel Vance, what brings you to town on a Thursday?" She looked past him to Willa, and her smile shifted into something more assessing but not unkind. "And who is this, Mrs. Patterson?" "This is Miss Willa Kershaw. She just arrived from Philadelphia and finds herself in need of lodging. I recalled you mentioning last month that you could use help with the extra boarders you have been taking in." Mrs. Patterson's shrewd blue eyes moved between them, reading a story Willa was not entirely sure she understood herself. "Is that so? Well, Miss Kershaw, come inside and we can discuss the particulars. Samuel, you can bring that trunk right into the front parlor for now." The interior of the boarding house was neat and surprisingly comfortable, with doily-covered furniture and embroidered samplers on the walls proclaiming various virtues and Bible verses. Mrs. Patterson led them to a small sitting room and gestured for Willa to take a chair, while Samuel set down the trunk with careful precision. "I will leave you ladies to talk," he said, settling his hat back on his head. He looked at Willa with those storm cloud eyes, and she felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening that she had not known was closed. "Miss Kershaw, I hope everything works out for you. If you need anything, Mrs. Patterson knows how to reach me." "Wait," Willa said, standing quickly. "I have not even thanked you properly. You stopped when no one else did, and I will not forget that kindness." Samuel nodded once, his expression softening slightly. "No thanks necessary. Welcome to Deadwood, Miss Kershaw." Then he was gone, his boots echoing on the wooden floor and then fading as the front door closed behind him. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, studying Willa with the sort of penetrating gaze that made her want to squirm like a child caught in mischief. "Samuel Vance is one of the finest men I have ever known," she said finally. "Salt of the earth, as they say. If he brought you here, then I am inclined to give you a chance. So tell me, girl, what are your skills and what brought you all the way out here to the Black Hills?" Willa sat back down, folding her hands in her lap to hide their shaking. "I can cook and clean. I managed my father's household after my mother passed 5 years ago. I am good with numbers and I can read and write better than most. As for why I came here—" She paused, swallowing against the lump in her throat. "I came to marry a man I met through correspondence. He was a shopkeeper here in Deadwood, or so he claimed. When I arrived today, he sent a messenger with a letter calling off our engagement. I have enough money to survive perhaps a week, but not enough to return home, and even if I did, I have no home to return to. I told my family I was leaving for good." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted from assessing to sympathetic. "Let me guess, David Hartley." Willa's head snapped up. "You know him?" "Everyone knows everyone in Deadwood, child, and David Hartley has done this before, or something like it. He likes the idea of romance more than the reality, and he is a coward besides. You are better off without him, though I imagine that is cold comfort right now." Mrs. Patterson stood, smoothing her apron with brisk efficiency. "Here is my offer. You work for me 6 days a week, cooking breakfast and supper for my boarders and keeping the common rooms clean. In exchange, you get a small room on the 2nd floor, all meals, and $1 a week for personal expenses. After 3 months, if we are both satisfied, we can renegotiate the terms. What do you say?" It was hardly the life Willa had imagined when she boarded that stagecoach in Philadelphia, but it was infinitely better than the alternatives. "I accept, and I thank you for your generosity, Mrs. Patterson." "No generosity about it. I need the help and you need the work. That is just good business." Mrs. Patterson's stern expression softened slightly. "But I will tell you this, Miss Kershaw. Deadwood might seem like the end of the earth to someone from a fine city back east, but there are good people here trying to build something real. Give it a chance, and you might find it gives you a chance in return. Now come on. Let me show you to your room so you can wash up before supper. My boarders expect their meals prompt at 6 o'clock." The room Mrs. Patterson led her to was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a tiny window overlooking the back garden. It was nothing like the spacious bedroom she had left behind in Philadelphia, with its papered walls and soft carpets, but it was hers and it was safe, and right now that felt like more than enough. Willa set her trunk at the foot of the bed and sank down onto the thin mattress, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. She had been so certain that David Hartley was her destiny, had believed every word of his eloquent letters describing the life they would build together in the Wild West. He had written about his successful shop, his standing in the community, his dreams of a family and a real home. And she had believed him because she wanted to believe, wanted to escape the suffocating expectations of her family and their endless attempts to marry her off to men twice her age with half the poetry in their souls that David's letters contained. Now she understood that poetry was just words, and words were cheap. Samuel Vance had not spoken poetry to her, had barely spoken at all, but his actions had meant more than 1,000 flowery letters. He had stopped when no one else did. He had helped when he did not have to. He had treated her with respect and asked for nothing in return. Willa stood and moved to the washstand, pouring water from the pitcher into the basin and splashing her face, watching the dust of her journey swirl away down the drain. The woman who stared back at her from the small mirror looked older than she remembered, her green eyes shadowed with exhaustion and disappointment, her dark blonde hair escaping from its pins in wild wisps around her face. But underneath the weariness, she saw something else emerging, something harder and more determined than the naive girl who had left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago. She would survive this. She would make a life here in Deadwood, with or without David Hartley, with or without any man at all if it came to that. And if she was very lucky, she might even find a way to thank the cowboy who had stopped when no one else did. Supper that evening was a blur of new faces and names Willa struggled to remember. Mrs. Patterson ran a tight ship, and her boarders consisted of a schoolteacher named Miss Emily Frost, a bank clerk named Mr. Thompson, a widow named Mrs. Chen who ran a laundry service, and 2 prospectors who had struck it, moderately rich and were living in town, while they decided what to do with their newfound wealth. Everyone was polite but curious, their questions about her background careful but persistent. "I came from Philadelphia to start fresh," Willa repeated for what felt like the 100th time, serving pot roast and potatoes with hands that had stopped shaking somewhere around the 3rd plate. "I hope to make Deadwood my home." Miss Frost, a sharp-featured woman in her 30s with intelligent eyes, nodded approvingly. "The West needs more women willing to put down roots. Too many people pass through looking to get rich quick and then disappear back east. Communities need stability." After the dishes were cleared and washed, Willa finally had a moment to herself in the small kitchen. She was drying the last of the plates when Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her expression thoughtful. "You did well tonight," the older woman said. "The food was good, and you handled yourself with grace despite everything you have been through today. I think this arrangement is going to work out fine." She paused, then added, "Samuel Vance stopped by the back door while you were serving. He wanted to make sure you were settled." "I told him you were managing beautifully." Willa felt her cheeks warm. That was kind of him to check. Samuel is a kind man, but he is not usually one to go out of his way like this. He keeps to himself mostly, focused on building up his ranch. Lost his parents to cholera 6 years back and has been running the place on his own ever since. Works harder than any 3 men combined, from what I hear. Mrs. Patterson studied her with those knowing eyes. "You made an impression, seems like." "I am sure he was just being neighborly," Willa said, hanging up the dish towel with more force than necessary. "I would not read anything into it, Mrs. Patterson smiled, a small secretive thing that made Willa want to protest further, but the older woman just patted her shoulder and headed toward the stairs. "Get some rest, child. Tomorrow is Friday and the boarders like a big breakfast before they start their week winding down." Willa climbed the stairs to her small room as the sounds of Deadwood's nightlife drifted through her window. Pianos jangled from the saloons, men shouted and laughed, and somewhere a dog barked with persistent enthusiasm. She changed into her nightgown and lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about the letter still tucked in her pocket, still carrying David Hartley's rejection. But instead of his words, she found herself remembering storm-gray eyes and a quiet voice asking if she needed help. She found herself remembering the easy strength with which Samuel Vance had lifted her trunk, the lack of judgment in his expression when she admitted she had nowhere to go. She had known him for less than an hour, and yet he had already shown her more genuine care than the man she had planned to marry. Sleep came eventually, heavy and dreamless, and when she woke to the sound of roosters crowing in someone's backyard, Willa rose and dressed with a sense of purpose she had not felt in days. She had work to do, a place to be, and a life to build. Whatever happened next, she would face it standing on her own 2 feet. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both exhausting and oddly comforting. Willa rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and preparing ingredients for supper, and had a few hours in the afternoon to herself before the evening meal. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a fair employer if a demanding one, quick to correct mistakes, but equally quick to praise work well done. The other boarders gradually warmed to Willa, sharing bits of gossip and local knowledge that helped her navigate the complex social landscape of a frontier town. She learned that Deadwood had only been established that spring, rising up almost overnight after gold was discovered in the Black Hills. The town existed in legal limbo, built on land that technically still belonged to the Lakota Sioux by treaty, though that did not stop the flood of prospectors and opportunists from pouring in by the thousands. Violence was common, justice uncertain, and fortunes were made and lost with dizzying speed. She also learned that Samuel Vance was something of an anomaly in Deadwood. While most men came seeking quick riches from gold claims, Samuel had come with his parents 5 years ago, before the gold rush, when the area was even more lawless and dangerous. They had built a cattle ranch through sheer determination and brutal hard work, only for cholera to steal his parents just as their dream was becoming reality. Samuel had kept going alone, expanding the herd and his land holdings, earning a reputation as a man of his word who treated everyone fairly, from the Chinese laborers who helped with his cattle drives to the Lakota scouts, who sometimes traded information about weather and grazing conditions. He could have sold out a dozen times for good money, Mr. Thompson told her over breakfast one morning. Men have offered him small fortunes for his water rights alone, but Samuel is not interested in getting rich quick. He is building something meant to last. Willa absorbed this information quietly, trying to understand the man who had stopped for her at the depot. She had seen him twice more in the 10 days since her arrival, both times from a distance as he conducted business in town. Once, she had been hanging laundry in Mrs. Patterson's backyard and glimpsed him riding past on that same dark horse, and once she had been at the general store purchasing supplies when he came in to settle an account. Both times she had felt a strange flutter in her chest, a nervousness she could not quite name, but both times he had been too occupied to notice her, and she had been too uncertain to approach him. She told herself it did not matter. He had done her a kindness, but that did not mean anything beyond simple human decency. She was here to build a new life, not to moon over the first man who treated her with respect. And yet she could not stop wondering what it would be like to know him better, to hear that low, rumbling voice in conversation, to understand the thoughts behind those storm cloud eyes. On the 15th day after her arrival, Willa's routine was interrupted by a commotion on Main Street. She was returning from the butcher's shop with a package of beef for dinner when she heard shouting and saw a crowd gathering near the saloon. Her first instinct was to hurry back to the boarding house, but curiosity got the better of her, and she moved closer to see what had caused the excitement. 2 men were squaring off in the street, both clearly drunk despite the early afternoon hour. One was a prospector she recognized from the saloon, a mean-spirited man named Jack Riley who had a reputation for starting fights. The other was younger, barely more than a boy, with terror written across his features as Riley shoved him backward. "You cheated me," Riley snarled, his hand hovering near the gun at his hip. "I want my money back or I will take it out of your hide." "I did not cheat nobody," the boy protested, his voice cracking. "You lost fair and square, Mr. Riley. Everyone saw." The crowd murmured, some agreeing with the boy, others taking Riley's side, but no one stepped forward to intervene. Willa felt her stomach turn with disgust at the cowardice on display. Grown men willing to watch a boy get hurt or killed over a card game rather than stand up to a bully. Then, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That is enough, Riley. Leave the kid alone." Samuel Vance pushed through the crowd, his expression harder than Willa had seen before, all the quiet gentleness gone and replaced by something that made even drunk Riley hesitate. Samuel positioned himself between Riley and the boy, his hands relaxed at his sides but his entire body radiating readiness. "Stay out of this, Vance," Riley spat. "This is between me and the cheater." "The boy is not a cheater. You are drunk and you lost your money through your own stupidity. Now you have a choice. Walk away and sleep it off or deal with me. What is it going to be?" Riley's face flushed an ugly red, and for a moment Willa thought he might actually draw his gun. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Samuel stand perfectly still, not backing down an inch. Then Riley seemed to deflate, his bravado leaking away under Samuel's steady gaze. "This is not over," Riley muttered, but he turned and stumbled back toward the saloon, his cronies following with disappointed expressions. Samuel turned to the boy, his expression softening. "You hurt?" "No, sir, Mr. Vance. Thank you for stepping in. I did not cheat him, I swear." "I believe you. But maybe stay away from cards for a while, at least until Riley leaves town. He holds grudges." Samuel clapped the boy on the shoulder and sent him on his way, and the crowd began to disperse, the entertainment over. Willa stood frozen, still holding her package of beef, her mind replaying the confrontation. Samuel had not hesitated to put himself in danger for someone he barely knew, had faced down a violent drunk without flinching. The same protective instinct that had made him stop for her at the depot, she realized, ran deep in his character. This was not a man who turned away from people in trouble. Samuel scanned the dispersing crowd and his eyes landed on her, recognition flickering across his face. He moved toward her with long strides, and Willa had to resist the urge to smooth her hair or check her appearance, irritated with herself for caring. "Miss Kershaw," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Good to see you. How are you settling in at Mrs. Patterson's place?" "Very well, thank you. She has been more than kind, and I appreciate you bringing me there." Willa hesitated, then added, "That was a brave thing you just did." "Riley could have shot you." Samuel shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Riley is all bluster. He would not have drawn on me, and if he had, well, I am faster." He said it matter-of-factly without boasting, and Willa believed him. Besides, someone had to step up. That boy did not deserve to die over a card game. Still, not everyone would have intervened. "Thank you for being someone who does." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a warmth entering those gray eyes that made Willa's breath catch. "You keep thanking me, Miss Kershaw. At this rate, I am going to get a swelled head." "I doubt that very much, Mr. Vance." They stood there for a moment, people flowing around them on the busy street, and Willa felt the strangest sensation, as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them. She had not expected to feel this way again, not after David's betrayal, but there was something about Samuel that made her want to trust again, to hope again. "I should let you get back to your errands," Samuel said finally, though he did not move. "But I was wondering, Miss Kershaw, if you might allow me to call on you sometime. Properly, I mean." Maybe Sunday afternoon when you are not working. We could take a walk, or I could show you some of the prettier parts around Deadwood. There are places outside town where you can almost forget about the mud and noise. Willa's heart did something complicated in her chest, fear and excitement warring for dominance. I would like that very much, Mr. Vance. His smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow even more handsome. Samuel, if we are going to be walking out together, you should call me Samuel. Then you must call me Willa. Willa. He said her name carefully as though testing its weight. It suits you. Strong and pretty at the same time. He cleared his throat, clearly embarrassed by his own poetry. I will come by Mrs. Patterson's on Sunday around 2 o'clock if that works for you. That would be perfect. Samuel touched his hat again and walked away, and Willa continued to the boarding house in a daze, her package of beef forgotten until Mrs. Patterson asked what had put such a smile on her face. When Willa explained about the Sunday visit, the older woman nodded with deep satisfaction. I knew it, Mrs. Patterson declared. From the moment he brought you to my door, I knew Samuel Vance had taken an interest. That man does not do anything by half measures, Willa. If he is courting you, he means it. It is just one walk, Willa protested, but she could not stop smiling. Nothing with Samuel Vance is ever just anything. You mark my words. Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness, each day dragging by as Willa found herself alternating between excitement and terror. What if she had misread everything? What if Samuel changed his mind the way David had? What if she was making a fool of herself all over again, trusting too quickly and hoping too hard? But when Sunday afternoon came and she heard Samuel's knock at the front door, all her doubts evaporated. She had dressed in her best remaining dress, a deep green that brought out her eyes, and had taken extra care with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was both neat and flattering. When she came down the stairs and saw Samuel standing in Mrs. Patterson's front parlor, his own Sunday best making him look civilized but no less powerful, the expression on his face told her everything she needed to know about whether he had changed his mind. You look beautiful, he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. You clean up rather well yourself, Willa replied, earning a grin from Samuel and a knowing chuckle from Mrs. Patterson. They walked through town and out toward the creek that ran north of Deadwood, following a narrow path that wound through stands of pine and aspen. Samuel pointed out landmarks, telling her about the history of the area and his own experiences settling here with his parents. He spoke about them with obvious love and lingering grief, describing his mother's strength and his father's stubborn optimism. They believed this place could be something more than just a gold rush town, Samuel said as they paused beside the creek, watching the water tumble over smooth stones. My father used to say that gold runs out, but land and cattle last forever if you treat them right. He wanted to build something that would matter, something that would still be here long after we are all dust. You are doing that, Willa said softly. Everyone speaks highly of you, Samuel. They say you are building the kind of ranch that will last generations. I hope so. That is the dream, anyway. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. What about you, Willa? What are your dreams? Beyond just surviving, I mean. No one had ever asked her that before, not really. David had asked what she thought about his dreams, his plans, but never what she wanted for herself. Willa considered the question carefully, watching the sunlight dance on the water. I want to belong somewhere, she said finally. I want to build a life that feels real, not just something I am enduring. I want to wake up each morning with purpose, to know that the work I do matters, even if it is just cooking meals and keeping a clean house. And I want. She hesitated, then pushed forward. I want someone to choose me and mean it. Not because I am convenient or because I can cook and clean, but because they see who I really am and want that person in their life." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, and when Willa dared to glance at him, she found him studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "That does not seem like too much to ask for," he said. "In fact, it seems like exactly what everyone should want and exactly what everyone deserves." They continued walking, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics, trading stories about their childhoods and laughing over shared experiences of learning hard lessons. Willa found herself relaxing in a way she had not since leaving Philadelphia, Samuel's presence both exciting and comfortable at the same time. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and his responses showed he was thinking about her words rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. As the afternoon waned and they headed back toward town, Samuel took her hand to help her over a rough patch of ground and did not let go afterward. Willa's heart raced at the contact, his palm warm and calloused against her own, and when she looked up at him, the expression on his face made her stomach flip. "Can I see you again?" Samuel asked as they reached Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. "Next Sunday, or sooner if you have time." "I would like that very much," Willa said. "Mrs. Patterson gives me Thursday afternoons free as well if you ever find yourself in town. Then I will make a point of being in town on Thursday." Samuel smiled, and then did something that made Willa's breath stop entirely. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Thank you for today, Willa. It was the best afternoon I have had in longer than I can remember." Willa could barely find her voice. "For me as well." She watched him mount his horse and ride away and then floated into the boarding house in a daze. Mrs. Patterson took one look at her face and laughed. "That good, was it?" "Better," Willa admitted. "Mrs. Patterson, I think I might be in real trouble here." "The best kind of trouble there is, my dear. The very best kind." The weeks that followed established a pattern that Willa came to treasure. Samuel visited every Thursday afternoon and Sunday, and they explored the area around Deadwood together, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. He told her about the challenges of running a ranch alone, the constant worry about drought and disease and cattle thieves. She told him about her life in Philadelphia, the suffocating expectations of her family, and the humiliation of David's rejection. "His loss," Samuel said firmly when she finally showed him the letter, 3 weeks into their courtship. They were sitting by the creek again, their favorite spot, and Samuel held the paper as though it might bite him. "This man is a coward and a fool, Willa. He does not deserve you, and honestly, I am grateful to him." "Grateful?" Willa was not sure she had heard correctly. "If he had not been a coward, you would have married him and I never would have met you. So yes, I am grateful. Does that make me selfish?" "Maybe a little," Willa said, but she was smiling. "I cannot say I disagree, though. If things had gone as planned, I would be Mrs. David Hartley right now, and I would never have known what I was missing." Samuel tore the letter into small pieces and tossed them into the creek, watching the current carry them away. "Good riddance. You do not need to carry his rejection around anymore, Willa. You are worth 10 of him, and I will spend as long as it takes proving that to you." He kissed her then, their first real kiss, and Willa felt the last pieces of her broken heart rearrange themselves into something new and whole. Samuel kissed the way he did everything else, with complete focus and surprising gentleness, his hands cradling her face as though she were infinitely precious. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Willa saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "I am falling in love with you," Samuel said, his voice rough. "I probably have been since the moment I saw you standing on that depot platform, looking lost and brave at the same time. I know it is fast, and I know you have been hurt, but I need you to know that I mean it, Willa. This is not some passing fancy for me. Willa's eyes burned with tears, but they were good tears this time, healing tears. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me, but I do not want to stop. Then do not stop, just fall and I promise I will catch you. They sat by the creek until the sun began to set, wrapped in each other's arms, and Willa felt a peace settle over her that she had never known before. This was what it was supposed to feel like, she realized. This certainty, this rightness, this sense of coming home to a person rather than a place. As autumn approached and the aspens turned gold in the hills around Deadwood, Samuel asked Willa to visit his ranch. It was a Saturday, her one full day off each week, and she borrowed Mrs. Patterson's wagon for the 5-mile journey. Samuel met her at the property line and guided her in, his pride evident as he showed her the land his parents had claimed, and he had expanded. The ranch house was simple but solidly built, with 2 bedrooms, a main room that served as kitchen and parlor combined, and a covered porch that looked out over rolling grassland dotted with cattle. It needed a woman's touch, Samuel admitted, gesturing at the sparse furnishings and bare walls, but the bones were good and there was room to grow. I want to add on, he said, showing her the area where he planned to build an additional wing. More bedrooms for when we have children and a proper dining room. Maybe a library if finances allow, somewhere to keep books and records. He paused, turning to face her. I am getting ahead of myself, I know, but I want you to see what I am working toward, Willa. I want you to know what I am offering before I ask the question I have been working up the courage to ask for weeks now. Willa's heart was hammering so hard she was certain Samuel could hear it. What question is that? Samuel took both her hands in his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. I love you, Willa Kershaw. I love your strength and your courage and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love how you care for Mrs. Patterson's boarders like they are family, and I love how you see the best in people even after being hurt. I want to build a life with you, right here on this land. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to raise children with you and grow old with you and face whatever comes together. He knelt in the dust of his ranch, still holding her hands, and Willa felt tears streaming down her face. Willa, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a cowboy who does not have fancy words but can promise you honesty and hard work and all the love in his heart? Yes, Willa said, the word coming out half laugh and half sob. Yes, Samuel, I will marry you. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes, but I trust you with that fear. I trust you with everything. Samuel surged to his feet and caught her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless, his hands in her hair and her arms wrapped tight around his neck. We should probably tell Mrs. Patterson, Willa said when they finally broke apart. She's going to claim credit for this, you know. She has been predicting it since the day you brought me to her door. She can have all the credit she wants, Samuel said, grinning. I do not care who predicted what, as long as you are mine and I am yours. They rode back to town together, Samuel insisting on driving the wagon so he could sit close beside her, their hands clasped the entire way. Mrs. Patterson took one look at their faces when they walked into the boarding house and let out a whoop of joy that brought all the boarders running. I knew it. I called it from the very beginning. Mrs. Patterson pulled them both into a fierce hug. Oh, my dears, I could not be happier for you. When is the wedding? Soon, Samuel said, looking at Willa for confirmation. There is no reason to wait, is there? No reason at all, Willa agreed. As soon as we can arrange it. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a crisp October morning with the aspens blazing gold and the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Willa wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson and the other boarding house ladies had helped her sew, simple but elegant ivory cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Samuel wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Willa's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the front of the small church. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, conducted by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through Deadwood. Mrs. Patterson cried openly, and even Mr. Thompson looked suspiciously misty-eyed as Samuel and Willa exchanged their vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Samuel kissed her, Willa felt the last shadow of David Hartley's rejection finally dissolve completely. She was Mrs. Samuel Vance now, wife to the man who had stopped when no one else did, partner to someone who saw her truly and loved what he saw. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The celebration afterward was held at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, with half of Deadwood's respectable citizens crowding in to wish them well. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the parlor, clumsy and enthusiastic, while food covered every available surface. Willa danced with Samuel until her feet ached, both of them laughing and stealing kisses when they thought no one was watching. As evening approached, Samuel helped Willa into the wagon loaded with her trunk and the few wedding gifts they had received, and they rode out to the ranch together as the sun painted the hills orange and pink. The ranch house glowed with lamplight, Samuel having ridden out early that morning to prepare everything, and when he carried her over the threshold, Willa felt tears prick her eyes again at the simple rightness of the moment. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance," Samuel said, setting her gently on her feet. "It does not quite feel real yet," Willa admitted. "This morning I woke up in Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, and now I am married and living on a cattle ranch. It seems impossible. Good impossible or bad impossible, the very best kind of impossible." Willa wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Samuel, thank you for stopping that day at the depot. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. I will always see you, Willa. That is my promise." He tilted her face up to his expression tender. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible or unwanted again." Their wedding night was gentle and passionate by turns, Samuel patient with Willa's inexperience, taking his time to show her all the ways their bodies could bring each other pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that was now theirs, talking softly about their hopes for the future and drifting into comfortable silences that felt as intimate as any words. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked suddenly, his voice quiet in the darkness. "Coming all the way out here for a man who did not deserve you? Do you wish you had stayed in Philadelphia?" Willa considered the question seriously, thinking about the girl who had stepped off that stagecoach just a few months ago, heartbroken and terrified and alone. "No," she said finally. "I do not regret it at all. If I had stayed in Philadelphia, I would have eventually married someone my family chose for me, someone appropriate and boring who saw me as a decorative piece for his home. I would have spent my whole life wondering what else was out there, what I might have found if I had been brave enough to look. Coming here was hard and scary, and it hurt when David rejected me, but it led me to you. So no, Samuel, I do not regret a single moment, even the painful ones, because they brought me here." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and they made love again with the moonlight streaming through the window and the sound of cattle lowing softly in the distance. The first months of marriage were an adjustment as Willa learned the rhythms of ranch life. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Samuel and the 2 ranch hands he employed. then spent her mornings tending the large garden she had planted, preserving vegetables for the coming winter. Afternoons were devoted to laundry, mending, and the thousand small tasks that kept a household running, and evenings were for cooking supper and managing the accounts, something Samuel was grateful to hand over to her capable management. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia or even at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, but it was satisfying in a way nothing else had ever been. This was her home, her life, her husband, and every bead of sweat and aching muscle was an investment in their future together. Samuel was a partner in the truest sense, never demanding that Willa handle women's work alone if he had the time to help. He insisted on doing his own laundry when she was overwhelmed with preserving the late autumn harvest, and he helped her prepare vegetables for canning while they talked about the day and made each other laugh. On Sundays, they still took walks by their creek, the spot that had become special to them during their courtship, and they talked about everything from philosophy to gossip from town. Winter arrived hard and fast, snow blanketing the ranch and turning the world into a pristine white wilderness. The work changed, but did not diminish, with cattle to be fed and watered, pipes to be kept from freezing, and constant vigilance against the cold that could kill livestock and humans alike. But inside the ranch house, Willa and Samuel created their own warmth, reading aloud to each other by the fire and making love under piles of quilts while the wind howled outside. It was during one of these frozen January nights, huddled close together for warmth, that Willa realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week to be certain, then another, her excitement and nervousness growing in equal measure. Finally, when she was sure, she told Samuel over breakfast on a Sunday morning, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "I am fairly certain I am expecting," she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup for courage. "It is still early, but all the signs are there." Samuel froze with his fork halfway to his mouth, his eyes widening. Then a smile spread across his face, growing until it transformed his entire expression into pure joy. "Really, Willa, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor, which we can visit the next time we go to town if you want confirmation." Samuel was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms with such enthusiasm that she laughed. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." He pulled back to look at her, his hands gentle on her face. "How do you feel? Are you all right? Do you need anything?" "I feel wonderful, if a little queasy in the mornings. But Samuel, I am so happy. I know we have only been married a few months, but I want this so much. So do I." "God, Willa, you have made me the happiest man alive." He kissed her thoroughly, then dropped to his knees and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." Willa ran her fingers through Samuel's hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was everything she had hoped for when she left Philadelphia, even if it looked nothing like the life she had imagined. This was real and solid and more precious than gold. The pregnancy progressed well despite the harsh winter. Willa continued her work around the ranch with Samuel hovering protectively, constantly worried she was doing too much. She laughed at his concern but secretly loved it, loved being cared for so thoroughly. In town, Mrs. Patterson appointed herself unofficial grandmother-to-be, showering them with advice and hand-knitted baby clothes. Spring arrived with a rush of meltwater and new life. And as Willa's belly swelled with their growing child, the ranch came alive around them. Calves were born, the garden was planted, and Samuel began work on the addition to the house, determined to have the extra bedrooms completed before the baby arrived in late August. On a warm evening in mid-August, 2 weeks before Willa's due date, her water broke while she was preparing supper. Samuel immediately rode for the doctor and Mrs. Patterson, his face pale with worry, despite Willa's assurances that first babies took their time. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, but Samuel never left her side except when the doctor insisted, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement through every contraction. Finally, as the sun was setting on what had been the longest day of Willa's life, their son was born, red-faced and screaming his displeasure at the world. Samuel cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and when the doctor placed the cleaned and wrapped baby in Willa's arms, she understood for the first time what real love meant. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered, running one finger gently over their son's downy head. "Willa, you are amazing. You did it." "We did it," Willa corrected, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "Samuel, what should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never quite settled on anything. Now, looking at their son's tiny face, Samuel said quietly, "What about James, after my father, James Samuel Vance?" "James." Willa tested the name, watching their son's eyes flutter as he began to settle. "I love it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, my darling boy." Mrs. Patterson stayed for a week to help with the household while Willa recovered, fussing over both mother and baby with fierce devotion. The older woman had tears in her eyes when she finally prepared to return to town, hugging Willa carefully. "You have come so far from that scared girl on the depot platform," Mrs. Patterson said. "Look at you now with a husband who adores you and a beautiful son. I am so proud of you, Willa." "I could not have done it without you," Willa replied honestly. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing, Mrs. Patterson. You helped me believe I could build a life here. All I did was give you a place to land, dear. You did the rest yourself." Mrs. Patterson kissed her cheek and then Samuel's. "Take care of each other, and bring that grandson of mine to visit soon, you hear." The weeks after James's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Willa and Samuel took turns walking the floor with their colicky son, both of them exhausted but united in their determination to figure out this parenting thing together. Samuel proved to be a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint and singing terrible off-key lullabies that somehow soothed James when nothing else would. As autumn arrived again, marking a year since their wedding, Willa often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. If someone had told her a year ago that being abandoned at a depot would lead to this life, this family, this profound happiness, she never would have believed them. But it was true, all of it, from the pain of rejection to the joy of falling in love to the overwhelming beauty of holding her son. One evening, after James had finally fallen asleep and they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over their land, Samuel pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Willa. "What is this?" she asked, turning it over curiously. "Open it." Inside was a deed, officially transferring half ownership of the ranch to her name. Willa stared at the document, her eyes filling with tears. "Samuel, why?" "Because this is not just my ranch, Willa. It is ours. You have worked as hard as I have to build this place, and you deserve to have your name on the deed. I should have done this when we got married, but I wanted to wait until we had been through a full year together, a full cycle of seasons. Now I know for certain what I suspected from the beginning. You are my true partner in every way that matters. This land belongs to both of us, just like everything else in our life belongs to both of us." Willa set the deed aside carefully and moved into Samuel's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you so much. Do you know that? Every single day I love you more than the day before. I know, because I feel the same way." He kissed her gently, then more deeply, his hand spanning her waist. Thank you for taking a chance on me, Willa. Thank you for seeing past the rough edges to the man underneath. Thank you for stopping, Willa replied. Thank you for being the one person who saw someone in trouble and did something about it. They sat together until full dark, talking softly about their plans for the future. Samuel wanted to expand the herd again next year, and Willa wanted to plant an orchard in the spring. They discussed building a proper barn and maybe getting chickens. Mundane, practical conversations that felt romantic simply because they were building this life together, piece by piece, day by day. The years that followed brought both challenges and triumphs. A drought in 1878 tested their resources and resolve, forcing them to sell off part of the herd to stay afloat, but they survived and rebuilt. A daughter, Margaret, was born in 1879, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's blonde hair. Then came another son, William, in 1881, and finally another daughter, Sarah, in 1883. The ranch house expanded to accommodate their growing family, with the additions Samuel had planned and a few more besides. The orchard Willa planted flourished, providing fruit for their family and extra to sell in town. Samuel's reputation as an honest rancher and fair dealer continued to grow, and he began serving on the town council, helping guide Deadwood's evolution from a wild gold rush town into a more stable community. Through it all, through every sleepless night with sick children and every argument about money or discipline or whose turn it was to deal with the leaking roof, Samuel and Willa's love deepened and matured. They learned each other's patterns, the way Samuel got quiet when he was worried and Willa became snappish when she was exhausted. They learned how to fight fair and forgive quickly, how to support each other's dreams and share each other's burdens. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel took Willa back to the depot where they had first met, now part of a much larger station serving the railroad that had finally reached Deadwood. They stood on the platform hand in hand, watching passengers come and go, and Willa thought about the terrified woman she had been a decade ago. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not stopped that day?" Samuel asked quietly, echoing her thoughts. "Sometimes," Willa admitted. "But not with regret, just curiosity. I like to think I would have found my way somehow, but I am grateful I did not have to do it alone. You changed my life that day, Samuel. You gave me hope when I had none left." "You changed mine too," Samuel replied. "I was so focused on work, on building the ranch and honoring my parents' memory, that I had forgotten what it all was for. You reminded me that land and cattle do not mean much if you do not have someone to share them with, someone to build a future with. You made everything mean something, Willa." They kissed there on the platform, middle-aged parents of 4 with calloused hands and sun-weathered skin, and Willa felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time Samuel kissed her by the creek all those years ago. As they drove back to the ranch in their sturdy wagon, purchased to replace the one Mrs. Patterson had loaned Willa so long ago, Samuel reached over and took her hand. "Here is to another 10 years, Mrs. Vance. And 10 after that, and 10 after that, until we are old and gray and our grandchildren are running around the ranch." "I will drink to that," Willa said, laughing. "Though I think we might already be old and gray at the rate these children are aging us. Speak for yourself." "I am still in my prime," Willa snorted inelegantly. "Your back was sounding like a symphony this morning when you got out of bed, old man. Ranch work does that to a person. Besides, you are the one who complained about your knees yesterday." They bickered good-naturedly the rest of the way home, their children's voices rising to meet them as they pulled into the ranch yard. James, now 9 years old, was supposed to be watching his younger siblings but had clearly been distracted by something more interesting. Judging by the state of Margaret's dress, and the suspicious dirt covering William's face. Sarah, just 2, was toddling around in circles chanting something incomprehensible. "I see everything is under control here," Samuel said dryly, jumping down from the wagon to scoop up Sarah before she could tumble off the porch steps. "We were playing explorers," Margaret announced, her 6-year-old face alight with excitement. "James said we could discover new lands." "The potato patch does not count as new lands," Willa said, trying not to smile at the destruction of her carefully tended garden. "Inside, all of you. Bath time before supper." The chorus of groans that greeted this announcement was proof that their children were healthy and normal, even if they were currently filthy. Samuel caught Willa's eye over the chaos and winked, and she felt a rush of love so strong it nearly staggered her. This was her life, messy and loud and exhausting and more precious than anything she could have imagined. Mrs. Patterson remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting the ranch regularly and hosting the family in town for Sunday dinners when they could make the trip. She delighted in her unofficial grandchildren, spoiling them shamelessly and telling them stories about the early days of Deadwood when Willa had first arrived. "Your mother was the bravest woman I had ever met," Mrs. Patterson told James during one such visit when he was 12 and starting to be interested in family history. "She came all the way across the country for a man who did not deserve her, and when he rejected her, she did not give up. She made a life for herself through sheer determination and grace. And your father, well, he was smart enough to recognize a treasure when he saw one." "What happened to the man who rejected her?" James asked, his young face serious. Mrs. Patterson glanced at Willa, who nodded permission to tell the truth. "He moved away a few years after your parents married." "Never did amount to much, from what I heard. Some people are like that, James. They are so busy looking for something better that they miss the good things right in front of them. Father says that a man's worth is measured by what he builds and who he loves," James said thoughtfully. "I want to be like him when I grow up. I want to build something that lasts and find someone to love the way he loves Mother." Willa had to excuse herself to the kitchen, overcome with emotion. Samuel found her there a few minutes later, wiping her eyes on her apron. "What is wrong?" he asked, concerned. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, so right it hurts sometimes." She turned to face him, taking in the gray starting to thread through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, the still strong shoulders that had carried so many burdens over the years. "Our son wants to be like you, Samuel. He sees what I see, what everyone who knows you sees. He sees a good man, the best man, and he wants to grow up to be the same." Samuel pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "If he grows up to be half the person his mother is, he will do just fine. You are the strong one, Willa. You are the one who had the courage to start over when everything fell apart. I just had the good sense to stop and offer you a ride." "You did so much more than that," Willa whispered into his chest. "You gave me everything." The years continued to pass, marked by the ordinary milestones of family life. James grew tall and strong, helping Samuel run the ranch, and eventually starting to court a sweet-natured girl from town named Anna. Margaret proved to have a gift for numbers, and began helping Willa manage the ranch's accounts and business dealings. William was all energy and mischief, keeping everyone on their toes with his schemes and adventures. Sarah, the baby, turned out to be a natural with animals, spending hours in the barn with the horses and cattle, earning their trust with patience and gentleness. In 1890, when Willa was 41 and Samuel was 44, they celebrated James's marriage to Anna with a party that drew people from 3 counties. Standing beside their son as he pledged his life to the woman he loved, Willa found herself thinking about that long-ago day at the depot, about how close she had come to giving up entirely. If Samuel had not stopped, if he had ridden past like everyone else, where would she be now? Certainly not here, surrounded by family and friends, watching her son begin his own journey into love and partnership. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel murmured during the dancing when they finally had a moment alone together. "Just how lucky I am," Willa replied honestly. "How lucky we are." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You made this life, Willa. Every bit of happiness we have you built with your own 2 hands. We built it," she corrected. "Together. Always together." The grandchildren began arriving in 1891, with James and Anna's son Thomas being the first. Margaret married a local teacher named Robert in 1893 and gave them twin girls the following year. William eventually settled down with a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth, though not before giving Willa more than a few gray hairs with his wild bachelor years. Sarah, true to her nature, shocked everyone by deciding to become a veterinarian, one of the first women in the territory to pursue such a career. Through all of it, through the births and weddings and graduations, through the droughts and the harsh winters and the economic ups and downs, Samuel and Willa remained each other's constant. They still took walks by the creek on Sunday afternoons when they could, still talked late into the night about their dreams and fears, still reached for each other in the darkness with the same need and tenderness they had felt as newlyweds. On a warm summer evening in 1901, 25 years after they first met, Willa and Samuel sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set over land that now extended 3 times as far as it had when Samuel's parents first claimed it. Their hair was gray now, their hands weathered by decades of hard work, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "No regrets?" Samuel asked, a callback to a question he had posed on their wedding night so many years ago. "Not a single one," Willa replied, lacing her fingers through his. "Well, maybe one." Samuel turned to her in surprise. "What is that?" "I wish I could go back and tell that frightened girl at the depot that everything was going to be all right, that the man who rejected her was actually doing her the biggest favor of her life, that in just a few minutes a cowboy was going to stop and change everything." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "But then again, maybe the not knowing was important. Maybe I needed to feel that lost in order to truly appreciate being found. You found yourself, Willa. I just gave you a safe place to do it. We found each other," she corrected gently, "and we built something beautiful together. A family, a home, a life worth living. That is what matters." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of laughter as Margaret and her family prepared dinner, having come to visit for the weekend. Tomorrow James and his brood would arrive, and the house would be full of chaos and noise and love. "Thank you for stopping that day," Willa said softly, "one more time. Thank you for being the one person who saw someone in need and did something about it." Samuel lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles just as he had done all those years ago on their first walk together. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing to offer but hard work and an honest heart." "That was everything I needed," Willa said. "That was more than enough." As they sat together watching the night settle over the ranch, surrounded by the evidence of their love in every building and fence line, in every grandchild's laughter, and every acre of carefully tended land, Willa thought about the letter she had burned years ago, the one that had seemed like an ending but had actually been a beginning. David Hartley had done her a favor, though he would never know it. His rejection had set her free to find something real, something lasting, something true. She had been left at the depot with a trunk and a letter, heartbroken and lost and terrified. But a cowboy had stopped, and that simple act of kindness had changed everything. It had led to love and partnership, to children and grandchildren, to a life rich with meaning and purpose. It had led her home in a way she had never expected, to a place she had never heard of until that terrible, wonderful day. And she would not change a single moment of it, not the pain or the fear or the uncertainty, because all of it had led her here, to this porch, to this man, to this beautiful, messy, perfect life they had built together from nothing but hope and hard work and love that grew stronger with each passing year. The stars continued to emerge overhead, countless and eternal, and Samuel pulled her closer against his side. They stayed there until the chill of evening drove them inside to the warmth of their home, surrounded by family, exactly where they both belonged.